My daughter drained every dollar of my $320,000 savings and disappeared with her criminal boyfriend. 42 years of hard work gone in one morning. The shock nearly crushed me, but my 15-year-old grandson Ethan wasn't afraid. He had been watching, listening, planning, and what he revealed turned betrayal into justice. You won't believe what I heard that changed everything forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room, the late afternoon light spilling across the wooden floorboards I had nailed down with my own hands 30 years ago. The silence pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't shake off. I kept seeing numbers in my head, 42 years at the Ford plant, hundreds of nights on double shifts. My back bent, my hands cracked and scarred, all for that account I thought would carry me through retirement. $320,000 gone, just like that. My daughter had drained it. Laura, the same little girl I carried on my shoulders through the county fair, had taken every dollar. The memories refused to leave me alone. I thought of the $60,000 I paid for her college degree, money I scraped together while skipping vacations, while driving my old truck 10 years past its worth. I thought of the $25,000 car I bought her when she first started working, a shiny red sedan she swore she needed to get to her job. And I thought of the $15,000 in legal fees I covered when her marriage to Derek collapsed the first time. Each of those sacrifices was carved out of my bones, and I gave them freely, believing a father's love could shield her from the world. Now it felt like I had financed my own betrayal. I looked around at what was left. The house, worth about $550,000 now, stood like a museum of every choice Mary and I ever made together. The oak dining table still bore the scratches from when Laura spilled her science project all over it in 7th grade. The wedding photo sat on the mantel, Mary's smile frozen in time, reminding me of promises we thought would last forever. The floors beneath me creaked with the rhythm of decades, every board hammered in by my younger hands. This house was more than wood and nails. It was the sum of our sacrifices, and now I felt it slipping through my fingers. If Laura had taken the savings without hesitation, what would stop her from trying to push me out of this place too? I imagined her and Derek looking at these walls and seeing nothing but dollar signs, another asset to cash out. The thought made me sick, but it also woke something in me. I kept remembering Laura sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face, saying she had no one else to turn to. I would pull out my checkbook, time after time, convincing myself that this was what fathers did. Each dollar I gave her was supposed to be a lifeline, but now I saw it for what it was, a chain binding me to her mistakes. I had confused love with enabling, and the result was a daughter who believed my wallet was endless, my patience infinite, and my sacrifices owed to her. The hardest truth was that I had trained her to think that way, and the cruelest part was how quickly she had turned that dependence into betrayal. The shock of the missing money had numbed me at first, but as I sat there, numbness gave way to a slow burn. Laura hadn't stumbled into a mistake. She had plotted this. She had looked at my life's work and decided it belonged to her more than it did to me. I realized then it wasn't just one act of theft. It was years of small steps, each time I said yes when I should have said no, each time I believed her promises that she would change. I felt anger rising, not just at her, but at myself for letting it go so far. That anger, bitter as it was, felt like a strange kind of strength. It told me I wasn't finished yet. I opened the old file cabinet in the corner, the one Mary used to keep so neat, and began pulling out folders. Dust rose from the manila envelopes, carrying the smell of old paper and older regrets. And then I saw them, the life insurance policy, the deed to the house, documents that still bore my name, my signature. For the first time since the account went dry, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't despair. These papers were proof that I wasn't powerless. They were tools, weapons even, against anyone who thought they could strip me bare. A small light flickered in the darkness, telling me I had options, that I could fight back. I picked up the wedding photo from the mantel. Mary's eyes met mine, warm and steady as they had always been. I whispered into the stillness, "Mary, I can't let them take everything we built. I won't let her do this to us. Not to me, not to Ethan." My voice cracked, but the words felt like a vow. I set the photo down carefully, almost like placing a stone on a grave, and I knew this moment was the turning point. The man who had sat in shock just hours before was gone. In his place stood someone older, angrier, but steadier too. The living room seemed different now, less like a tomb and more like a command post. The afternoon light dimmed into evening, casting long shadows across the floor. Each shadow looked like a reminder that time was short, but not gone. My chest still ached from the betrayal, my hands still shook with grief. But beneath it all, a current of resolve began to hum. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also forced me to open my eyes. Laura had taken my money, but she hadn't taken my will. Not yet. I looked around one last time, then straightened my back. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something new. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I woke before the sun, the house still dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own breathing and the clock on the mantel. I sat up slowly, felt the stiffness in my back, and remembered all at once why sleep had been thin. Laura had emptied the account. $320,000. The number didn't float anymore. It landed like a cinder block in my chest. I swung my feet to the floor and stood there until the dizziness passed. I told myself to move. Men who stand still drown in their own thoughts. Men who move at least have a chance. I made coffee the way Mary taught me. 2 scoops, a slow pour, a clean filter. I let the first cup sit for a second on the counter so the steam could rise and fog the window above the sink. Then I carried it to the oak table. I refinished the summer Laura left for college. I laid out the folders I'd found last night. Life insurance with my name printed clean. The deed to this house, recorded and notarized, the lines sharp even after the years. A copy of my will I had barely looked at since Mary passed. I spread those papers like a general spreads a map. Then I picked up the phone and called the only person I trusted with the law, Carol Jenkins. She answered on the 3rd ring, steady voice, the same voice that walked us through probate when Mary died. I told her what happened. I kept my word slow. I gave the date and time of the withdrawal, the amount, and the fact that Laura's name was on the account. I told her what the teller said yesterday. Insufficient funds, then a printout with a 0 that looked like a hole cut in the world. Carol did not rush me. When I finished, she took a breath and said what I already suspected but needed to hear from someone who knew. If Laura is a joint owner, the bank will treat that withdrawal as authorized. It feels like theft. In many states, it isn't a charge they'll take unless there's fraud we can prove. We are not without tools, she added, and her voice found a firmer edge. We can freeze any linked accounts, close the joint account, and open a new one in your name only. We can pull your pension direct deposit before the next cycle. We can record a homestead affidavit and recheck the deed. We can also discuss a trust for the house, so no one can move against it without your wanting them to. But you need to move now. I said I was ready. I could hear her typing. She asked for my email. She sent me a checklist before we hung up. Place a 90-day fraud alert with the credit bureaus. Call the bank's fraud department even if the branch manager shrugs. Require 2-factor authorization for all accounts. Change every PIN, every password, even the ones I thought I could keep. Secure the deed, the insurance, the will, and consider a revocable trust naming Ethan as the beneficiary so there would be no guesswork later. I wrote every item down on a yellow pad. I repeated them out loud. Saying them made my voice steadier. She told me to come by at 2 o'clock to sign a few things and start the filings. I thanked her. She paused, softer now, and said she was sorry. The word landed like a hand on my shoulder. I didn't know how much I needed that one word until I heard it. I took my second cup of coffee in the truck with me. The morning had turned bright and sharp, the kind of blue sky that lies to you and says the world is simple. I drove to the bank on Main, parked under the maple where I always parked, and sat a minute with the engine off. I watched people go in and out, a young mother wrestling with a stroller. A man in a worn suit is carrying a deposit bag. Everyone looked like they belonged to an easier day. Then I went inside. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and printer ink. The teller I knew from years of deposits greeted me with the small smile people save for routine business. I asked to speak to the branch manager. I kept my voice level. I did not want pity. I wanted action. The manager had a tidy office with a glass wall that made me feel like I was in an aquarium. He pulled up the account and showed me the line, 9:23 a.m. Withdrawal, full balance. He pointed to the authorization notes. He explained, gently but too practiced to be personal, that a joint owner has full rights. He said the word legal twice, like he was setting a brick. I felt heat climb up my neck. I asked him to close the joint account. Today, he said yes. I asked to open a new account in my name only. He said yes. I asked to stop every automatic payment to Laura's phone, to any card she might still have, to any transfer that looked like a habit I had formed when I still thought habits were kindness. He said, yes, we can do that. He printed forms. My pen scratched through signatures. I changed my PIN at his desk and waited for the text to confirm. I told him I wanted alerts on my phone for any withdrawal over $50. He smiled like that was a smart idea. It made me want to knock the smile off his face, and then I hated myself for that thought. He was doing his job. The person who knew how to hurt me had already walked out with the money. When it was done, he handed me a folder with my new account information and a temporary debit card. He said he was sorry, and he meant it more than the policy book made him say it. On the way out, I passed the ATM where I learned my nest egg had become a hole. I stopped and touched the metal frame with my fingertips. Cold, hard. I remembered how my hand shook yesterday. I remembered the woman behind me clearing her throat. I remembered saying sorry to her like I had done something wrong by standing there and losing 42 years in 2 minutes. I sat in the truck and called Laura. The phone rang. It rang long enough that I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she did. No hello, no dad, just a voice I barely recognized. Flat, prepared. I know why you're calling. I told her what she already knew. You took it all. That was my retirement. That was the roof over your son's head. There was a pause, like she was deciding which script to use. It's my turn, Dad. You'll figure it out. You always do. Her words slid into me like a dull knife. I asked her where she was. She laughed, not a happy laugh, a laugh made of glass. Don't try to find us. We're starting fresh. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone until my own reflection looked like a stranger. The quiet in the cab brought another memory I didn't want, but it came anyway. 3 years ago. A night when rain hammered the roof so hard I thought the shingles would give. The phone rang after midnight. Laura's voice, ragged. Derek's in trouble. He needs help. Please. I didn't ask questions. I didn't ask what kind of trouble or why it was always midnight when trouble came. I pulled on my boots over pajama pants, grabbed my wallet, drove to the all-night ATM, took out $2,000 in 20s, and met her in a parking lot behind a gas station where the lights flickered. She hugged me and cried against my shirt. She said I was the only one she could count on. I believed her. I pressed the money into her hands and told her to go home, to rest, to be careful. A week later, I learned he had used the cash to post bail after a bar fight. When I confronted Laura, she said something about misunderstandings and how he was trying to turn his life around. I let it go, because I wanted to believe that love could rescue people who did not want to be rescued. Sitting in the truck now, I could smell the gasoline from that night. I could hear the rain again. I could feel the wet money in my hand. Betrayal does not arrive fully grown. It grows up in the dark while you're telling yourself that helping is the same as healing. I took a long breath and spoke out loud so I could hear my own conviction. They think I'm weak. They're about to learn I'm not. I let the words stand alone. I let them echo in the cab and in my bones. Saying them didn't make me strong. It reminded me that strength is a choice you make, and then make again every hour you want to quit. I drove home by the slower road, past the park where I taught Laura to ride a bike, past the diner where Mary and I had our first breakfast as husband and wife. The town hadn't changed as much as I had in the last 24 hours. That felt unfair and strangely comforting all at once. At the house, I changed the deadbolt I had been meaning to change for a year. I put a security bar on the back door. I took the family documents from the top drawer and put them into the fireproof box under the bed, then moved the box to the hall closet and stacked old blankets on top of it. I made a list on the yellow pad, the one with Carol's checklist. Freeze credit, 2-factor on email and bank, new passwords. Call the pension office to reroute the direct deposit to the new account before the 15th. Call insurance to add Ethan as a contingent beneficiary. Ask Carol about a revocable trust for the house worth around $550,000 and how to protect it from any sudden grab. File a police report even if they shrug, because paper creates a trail that sometimes matters later. I added one more line at the bottom. Do not tell Laura anything else. By noon, I had placed the fraud alert with all 3 credit bureaus. The scripts were the same, but the act of telling a stranger my identity needed protection built a small wall where there had been none. I called the pension office, waited on hold long enough to hear the same instrumental song 6 times, then got a human being who understood what direct deposit means when you rely on it for groceries and heat. She changed the routing. She wished me luck. I stood up from the table and felt lighter by half an ounce. Half an ounce is not much. It is enough to stand up straight for another hour. At 2 o'clock, I stepped into Carol's office. The reception smelled like lemon cleaner and paper. The chairs were the kind Mary would have liked, not too soft, not too modern. Carol shook my hand and looked me in the eye. She is a small woman, but that day she was the tallest person in the room. We went through the steps. She slid forms to my side of the desk and explained each one in words I could carry home. An affidavit to record my homestead rights with the county so no one could pretend I had abandoned the house. A revised, durable power of attorney that removed Laura and named me alone, with a later provision that could include Ethan when he became an adult. An amendment to my will to clarify that distributions would be managed by a trustee and not handed out all at once. She did not tell me what to feel. She gave me tools. Tools felt like air. I signed until my hand cramped, and then I signed some more. When we finished, she asked if I had considered a revocable living trust to hold the house. I said I had considered everything in the last day, but I did not know enough to decide. She explained how the deed could be retitled into a trust where I remained the trustee while I was alive. She explained how that could help avoid a tangle later and make it harder for anyone to push me before I was ready. She spoke plainly. She did not promise magic. We scheduled a follow-up for the document draft. On my way out, she said to call her if Laura contacted me again. I nodded. I did not tell her that the voice I had heard this morning did not sound like a person who calls back to make peace. I left the office and drove to the police station because Carol had said it was wise to file a report even if it went nowhere. The patrol officer at the desk listened, typed, and then told me what I suspected. With Laura on the account, they would view it as a civil matter unless I could show coercion or incapacity. He handed me a case number anyway. He told me to keep records. He told me to save every text, every email, every voicemail. I walked back to the truck with a slip of paper that did not feel like much. I put it in my wallet behind Mary's old grocery list I still carry because I can't throw her handwriting away. I said her name quietly. Saying it made me feel less alone. Back at home, I made a sandwich and ate half of it because hunger and grief pull in different directions. I set the chessboard on the coffee table out of habit. Ethan and I always play on Tuesdays. He likes to open with the same 2 moves to see if I notice. I always notice and pretend I don't, so he can enjoy the small surprise when I spring a trap on him later. The board sat between us even though he wasn't there yet. I looked at the white king and thought about the way it only moves 1 square at a time, slow but sure, never rushing because the game is decided by position, not panic. I smiled a little at that. I needed that kind of thinking now. The phone buzzed on the table. Not a call. An alert from the new account. A test deposit of $1 was made to verify the routing. It was a small thing, so small it would be a joke any other day, but I thanked God for that single dollar because it meant motion. It meant the next pension payment would not vanish into a hole Laura could open. I wrote down a few more lines on my list. Safe deposit box for originals. Talk to the bank about a notary for the trust papers when Carol finishes them. Call the utility companies to remove Laura's number from every account notice so she cannot use the information against me. It was not revenge. It was offense. Near dusk, I stepped outside and cut back a few branches that had started to scrape the roof. The ladder rattled, and I felt the age in my knees. I took my time. I looked at the shingles. I thought about every nail I had hammered into this place in 30 years. The house had held us through winters and summers, through Mary's sickness, through Ethan's first birthday party, where icing got into the carpet so deep I never did get it all out. This wasn't just property. It was a memory made into wood and glass. Standing there, I knew that if anyone tried to sell it out from under me, I would chain myself to the front porch if I had to. Then I laughed. Even alone, I knew the image was ridiculous. But the will behind it was not. When I came back inside, there was a voicemail from my neighbor, Mike Turner. He has a badge and a calm voice. He said he had heard something from a friend at the county about a guy with Derek's description involved in a string of petty frauds 2 towns over. He told me to be careful about who came to the door. He told me to change the Wi-Fi password because people who plan things sometimes sit in cars outside and pull what they can from the air. I changed the password. I changed the router name too, from the old one Mary picked because it made the grandkids laugh, to something plain. It felt like saying goodbye to one more small softness. I did it anyway. The house settled around me as the sky went purple. I pulled the curtains and turned on the lamp by the mantel. The wedding photo caught the light. Mary's dress had a sheen you only see in old prints. I stepped closer and touched the glass. I spoke to her again. They moved against us, Mare. I was slow. I see it now. But I'm not done. I'll protect what we built. For Ethan. For you. Saying her name steadied me more than the lamp did. I felt the anger in me, hot but contained now, like a forge you can use to shape steel if you respect it. I sat and called the utility companies. I sat and called the insurance agent to add a note that no one but me could make changes by phone, not even someone with my birthday and the last 4 numbers of my Social Security. Each person read a script about privacy and security. Each time I agreed and thanked them. I kept notes. Times, names, confirmation numbers. I would not rely on memory now. Memory had carried too many soft places in the last decade and made me pay. Around 8, I returned to Carol's email and saw one more attachment. It was a simple letter I could send by certified mail if Laura tried to step onto my property to claim anything here was hers. It did not breathe fire. It asserted rights. It told the story in a paragraph that would matter to a judge if it came to that. I printed it and slid it into a folder labeled House. I underlined the word, then I underlined it again. I had already closed the joint account, but the struggle was not a single door you shut. It was a hallway of doors. Every one you close keeps out a draft. The phone lay quiet for a long time. No more alerts, no more voicemails. I let the silence sit with me. In that quiet, doubt crept back like a stray cat. I wondered if I had failed as a father. I wondered if there was a sentence, one sentence, I could have said 5 years ago that would have changed this path. I wondered if Mary would blame me for loving Laura the way I did. Then I remembered Mary in the hospital when she took my hand and said, "Love without boundaries becomes a net you wrap around yourself." She had known before I did. I closed my eyes and said I was sorry for not hearing her then. I opened my eyes and said I would hear her now. I stood and paced the room once, twice, 3 times. The floor creaked under the same boards my hands had set. I read my list again. I added one last line at the bottom under a hard rule. Do not chase, do not beg. Secure and wait. Let them make the next mistake. It felt cold to write it. It felt necessary. The phone rang. Not a voicemail. A ring. I looked at the screen and expected to see Laura's number. For a second the anger warmed up my throat, but the name on the screen made me sit down fast like someone had pressed a hand on my shoulder again. Ethan, my grandson, who builds chess traps for fun and pretends to be surprised when I fall into them. His voice when I answered was calm, calmer than mine had been all day. "Grandpa," he said, "I know more than you think. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me." Ethan's call hung in the room like a held breath. I told him to come over. The chessboard was still set up on the coffee table, white waiting on my side, the king square in the center like a man bracing for the weather he cannot change. When Ethan walked in, he did not smile. He moved like someone older than 15. He set his backpack down, unzipped it with careful fingers, and laid out papers across the oak surface I had sanded the summer Mary got sick. A mugshot slid into the lamplight. Derek Morrison. case numbers, booking dates, a string of charges that read like a bad road after a thaw. Robbery, fraud, assault. There was a county-wide notice from last week for questioning in an armed robbery at Murphy's Corner. A map followed, with a neat red circle around an address on Lane Avenue in Columbus, not far from the university. Ethan had scribbled a license plate number in the margin and drawn arrows that connected dates to places. He tapped the pages one by one like calling moves in a quiet chess match. He told me he had printed them during lunch in the computer lab. He told me he had woken for water a little after midnight and heard Laura and Derek whispering in her room with the door nearly closed. He heard the address. He heard the plan. He wrote everything down at his desk so he would not forget. His notes were tidy, block letters, small check marks next to facts he had confirmed. He had built a record because he did not trust luck to do what work can do. Then he drew out a single sheet and turned it so I could see. An email, printed from the home computer. The header showed our network and the timestamp, 1:32 a.m. The message was from Laura to Derek. "Dad won't last forever. That money is practically ours." I had to hold the edge of the table to stay put. Those words took the last piece of doubt and ground it into dust. This was not panic. This was not a mistake. This was a calculation, cool as a ledger. I read the sentence again until the letters blurred. Ethan put his hand on my sleeve. He said he was sorry I needed to see it, and sorry that I did see it, and that both could be true at once. I thought about the night 3 years ago when I handed Laura $2,000 in 20s under the halogen lights of a grocery store lot because she said Derek had made a mess and needed help. I learned later that it had paid his bail after he had laid a man out on the floor of a bar. Betrayal grows quietly, the way mold grows in a damp corner if you never open a window. Ethan was not finished. He showed me another sheet, just his neat handwriting with a date, a time, and a confirmation number from the police tip line. He had used a payphone by the bus stop so the call would never land on our bill. He had given them the address, the plate, the description of the motorcycle, the description of Derek's jacket, and the fact that a woman traveling with him had emptied a family account for cash. He had done it before the first period and made it to class on time. The house felt different while I listened. It is a strange thing to feel the floor steady after a day of sliding. I had spent the morning in a fog of shame at the bank and the afternoon in the tired fury of a man who kept saying he should have seen this coming. Now the fog thinned. The road came into view. Carol Jenkins, my lawyer, had told me what to secure. Ethan had given me something else. Proof, timing, a path wider than my fear. I told him I was proud of him. I meant it, and he knew. We waited then. Waiting is its own work. The clock on the mantel sounded loud. The lamplight went the color of tea. I set water to boil and rinsed 2 mugs. Ethan stacked the printouts into clean piles, then arranged the white chess pieces as if to play. He touched the king and pulled his hand back. "Not yet," he said. He meant the board. He meant life. When the phone rang, the sound cracked the room open. The caller said she was a detective with Columbus. She asked me to confirm my address, my name, and my relationship to Laura. Then she thanked whoever made the tip, said officers had served a warrant connected to the Murphys' robbery, and said Derek had tried to run but did not make the stairs. He was in custody. A woman at the scene matched Laura's license and date of birth. She was being questioned. The detective wanted any documentation I had that tied the family's money to Laura's movements. I told her about the email and the printouts. Ethan held up the confirmation slip and mouthed the number. I read it into the phone. The detective whistled under her breath. She said we had done good work. She told me to keep my doors locked and to let her know if Laura made contact. I thanked her, placed the phone on the table between the kings, and let the quiet return. It did not last. 10 minutes later, my phone flashed Laura's name. I pressed the speaker and set it down. Ethan's face did not change. The line connected, and the sound of her hit the room the way a train hits a crossing. High, sharp, hot with blame. "How could you do this to me? They took him. They knew everything. The address, the plate, the exact apartment. You called them, Dad. You ruined my life." I let her spend the first rush. When she needed air, I placed my words where they belonged. I protected my family. From you. I kept my voice even. Calm is a kind of armor most people never learn to pierce. The line went quiet enough to hear traffic on her end. A horn, a siren far away. When she came back, her tone went cold. "I can't believe you would turn on your own daughter." I told her the truth. "You drained 32 years of savings. You took the roof over your son's head and called it a fresh start. You walked out the door with the money I saved while your mother was still alive." I did not shout. I did not beg. I put the facts down like boards across a ditch. She tried to step over them. She said the email was a joke, taken out of context, and the lie clanged like a spoon in an empty pot. She said Derek had promised her a real life, a life where no one looked down on her, a life where she did not have to punch a clock or hear me talk about overtime. She said we deserved better than this small town and my rules. We deserved. The words sat ugly in the air. I looked at the scratches in the table where she sanded a 7th-grade birdhouse. I thought of Mary's laugh in the kitchen. I thought of deserve and what it means when a person says it while holding someone else's wallet. I told Laura what I had done since the bank. I told her the joint account was gone, the pension rerouted, the house protected under homestead, and moving toward a living trust with Carol's name on every page. I told her the bank would flag any new line of credit tied to me. I told her the email was already in a fireproof box, with the deed and the insurance policy. I told her the police had a case number, and so did I. She started to breathe faster. She accused me of humiliating her. She said I enjoyed making her look small. Then she tried a different road, pity. She said she was stranded and hungry. She said she could come home if I wired a few $100s right now. She said she was sorry. The sorry sat there like a word she knew belonged in the conversation, not a truth she believed. My hands shook. I remembered the 2020s. I remembered the way my heart used to leap when my phone buzzed, the way a dog flinches when the door slams because he has learned the slam means trouble. I looked at Ethan. His face was calm, not hard. Calm, like a lake after a storm when the wind has finally gone home. No. The sound of it surprised me. It was small, but it was clean. On the other end of the line, she gasped. Then she got angry again. She said I would die alone. She said I would regret this by Christmas. She said I had always loved rules more than people. I looked at the family pictures on the mantel. Mary's smile. Ethan is at the science fair with his ribbon. Laura graduated with the tassel caught in her eyelashes while I tried to fix it with clumsy fingers. Love had been the rule I lived by. It still was. Love is not the same as surrender. The storm on the phone built and broke and built again like a January thaw that fools you into thinking spring is close. She threatened to come to the house with friends. I told her the locks were changed and the neighbors were watching. She said she would tell a judge that I hit her when she was a child. I told her the truth has its own way of standing up, even when I am tired. She told me everyone would side with her. I told her the email would not. Paper does not take sides. The paper tells what it is given. Ethan leaned forward. He spoke for the first time. "Mom, it is time to stop." His voice was gentle and firm at once, the way I wish mine had been when Laura was a teenager who needed a boundary more than a bailout. She sucked air through her teeth like a match before it flares. She said I had poisoned him against her. Ethan said she had done that herself. Then he went quiet. He knows how to finish a thing without grinding it into dust. Her voice dropped to a low place that used to scare me because it meant she had settled on the story she would tell herself. "This isn't over," she said, each word clipped. The line went dead. The tiny click sounded like a thin branch snapping in the woods. We sat in the quiet with the kings between us like two old men who had seen too much and were still standing. I looked at Ethan. "It actually is," I said. Ethan gathered the papers into a stack and gave them to me. He said he would share copies with the detective to make sure nothing went missing. He said people like Derek worked in shadows, and we would not. I told him he had done enough for one day. He shook his head and pulled something else from his backpack. My old camera, the one Mary used at Christmas because she liked the sound it made. He said he wanted to take pictures of the documents and of the email on the screen so there would be a record that did not depend on anyone's good memory. I also took photographs of the computer screen with the email still open, the timestamp clearly visible, 1:32 a.m., Tuesday, April 8th. Ethan photographed the browser history, the sent folder, and the router log with our home network name glowing in the corner. He printed the metadata page that shows the originating IP address and stapled it to the message. Paper, picture, number, time. A chain. If anyone ever tried to say we made it up, the chain would speak for itself, steady and plain, sharp as a carpenter's nail. I called Carol and left a message that ran longer than I planned. I told her about the arrest, the email, the detective, the threats, and the fact that my grandson had done the kind of work men twice his age forget how to do. I asked her to add the message to our file and to move forward with the trust first thing in the morning. Then I put the phone face down, buttered the skillet, Mary seasoned it until it shone, and made grilled cheese the way Ethan likes, with the corners pressed so the cheese would not leak. We ate in the living room. We did not play chess. Not yet. We let the pieces stand guard while we chewed and remembered what it felt like to eat a simple meal without flinching at the sound of a notification. Night pressed the windows like a slow wave. The house did not feel empty. It felt awake. I carried the email to the hall closet and opened the fireproof box. The deed sat there, the insurance policy, the appraisal from last year that put the house at about $550,000, the copy of my will, and Mary's church program from the service where half the town showed up because they knew what real kindness looked like. I slid the email into a clear sleeve and set it between the deed and the policy. Paper can be armor if you let it. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I did not know. A photo of Derek in a hallway washed in fluorescent light. Orange jumpsuit. Smaller, without the jacket, without the swagger, eyes dull from the chase. Another message from the detective followed. In custody. Your grandson helped us connect the dots. We will be in touch. I read it out loud so Ethan could hear it the way I heard it. He nodded. He did not crow. He exhaled like a runner who has made the turn and can finally see the finish line. I stepped onto the porch. The night air cooled the anger that still sat hot on my chest. Streetlights turned the sky the color of old tin. A few stars pushed through anyway. I told Mary what had happened. I told her I had finally said no and meant it. I told her our grandson had a spine made of something stronger than luck. The boards under my feet creaked. The same boards I nailed the spring we paid off the last of the mortgage. Work for another day, I thought. Not everything has to be fixed tonight. When I came back, Ethan had moved the white king to his side and the black king to mine. He said it felt right to switch for once. I understood. He asked what happens next. I told him we keep moving one square at a time. We build fences. We tell the truth even when it aches. We keep every scrap of paper. We do not let anyone talk us out of what we know happened. He said okay, and put the pieces back in their case. Before he went upstairs, he stood on the bottom step and asked if Laura might come home and try to make it right. I did not rush for an answer. I told him people change sometimes, but change rarely begins on the same night a person says it is not over. He nodded. He is learning the slow math of hope. After he was in bed, I called the answering service and left Carol another message. I asked for a clause in the trust that protected my right to live in the house as long as I am breathing and in my right mind. I asked that any attempt to encumber the property require my written consent and a court order served in person. I said the number again, 550,000, because saying it out loud makes it real enough to protect. I told her the savings figure, 320,000, so there would be no mistake about the scale of what was taken and why we were moving fast. I washed the dishes and dried them with the threadbare towel. I turned off the lamp and stood in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint white noise that helps Ethan sleep. Every small sound felt earned. On the yellow pad I had been using all day, I underlined the last line of the plan, secure and wait. Then I wrote a new word next to it, heal. I know what I lost. I lost money that took most of a lifetime to set aside. I lost the picture in my head of a daughter who would never do the thing she just did, but I did not lose my name. I did not lose my home. I did not lose the boy who set those papers on the table and helped me stand up straight. In the world we are given, That is a kind of wealth the bank cannot freeze and a thief cannot throw over his shoulder and run with into the dark. Just before midnight, I wrote one more note and slid it into the fireproof box. They thought I was weak. They learned I am not. The key turned. The click was small. It was enough. Feeling ignored and treated unfairly is a hard weight, isn't it? If you believe everyone deserves to be seen and have justice, comment keyword justice. Now watch what we do next to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The morning after the storm of calls, emails, and courtroom signatures, the house felt like a different place. The silence was no longer heavy with dread. It was lighter, almost clean, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for me to claim them back. The fight had reached its conclusion, and the truth had done its work. Derek was in custody. Laura's schemes were stripped bare for everyone to see. And me, I was standing, bruised but not broken, with something solid to protect against. The first matter was the house. Carol Jenkins, my lawyer, met me in her office with a file thick enough to choke a stapler. She walked me through every page, explaining how the deed to my home, worth $550,000 at last appraisal, was now safely tucked inside a trust with Ethan as the sole beneficiary. She had me sign the last of the documents in black ink, each stroke steady, like nails hammered into the coffin of Laura's plans. When I closed the pen and pushed the papers forward, I felt the kind of peace a man feels when a door is locked at last. "It's his future now," I told her. She nodded. "And yours is safe while you breathe." Back home, Ethan helped me pack the documents into the fireproof box, sliding them between the insurance policy and Mary's church program. He handled the papers carefully, like heirlooms. I told him, "This house is yours one day, but more than that, the security it gives you is yours right now." His face brightened, though his eyes carried a maturity no 15-year-old should bear. The savings account was gone, $320,000 drained, but I had not told anyone about the small emergency stash. $3,200 in old bills tucked into an envelope at the back of my workshop cabinet, wrapped inside a faded Sears catalog. I pulled it out that afternoon and set it on the table. Ethan looked at me, wide-eyed. "Grandpa, what's that?" I told him it was the lesson of a lifetime. Never put all your trust in numbers on a screen. "This little cushion," I said, "will keep the lights on until the pension comes and until you find your own way." From that point, our lives became simpler. Pension checks covered the basics. Ethan picked up lawn mowing jobs around the neighborhood, pushing his grandfather's old mower across uneven yards with the determination of a man twice his age. He came home sweaty, his shoes green at the edges, with a few folded bills he tucked proudly into a jar labeled college. He never once asked me for pocket money. Watching him, I felt pride deeper than any balance sheet could show. Meanwhile, Laura's world collapsed. With Derek behind bars and no access to the accounts, she found herself renting a cramped one-bedroom on the edge of town, the kind with paint peeling off the walls and a refrigerator that groaned all night. Word spread quickly. Old friends stopped answering her calls. The family kept their distance. She tried phoning me once, twice, then a dozen times. Sometimes she left voicemails that swung from rage to begging. "Dad, I didn't mean it that way. Dad, you don't understand. Dad, please, just a little to get me through." I listened once, then deleted every message after. I told myself, and I told Mary in the quiet of the living room, that love without boundaries becomes slavery. One Sunday afternoon, a neighbor told me he had seen Laura outside the grocery store, sitting on the curb with a plastic bag at her feet, staring at the asphalt. For a moment, guilt stirred in me. She was still my daughter, the little girl who once cried on the kitchen chair when she scraped her knee. But the guilt passed when I remembered the email. "Dad won't last forever. That money is practically ours." She had crossed the line from desperation into betrayal, from need into greed. And once you make that step, there's no return until you learn the lesson yourself. I did not take her calls. I did not send money. For the first time in my life, I held the line, and in holding it, I found freedom. I walked through the house without the weight of fear pressing on my chest. The oak floors I laid with my own hands gleamed in the late-day sun. The photos on the mantel felt like companions again, not reminders of what had been threatened. I planted tomatoes in the backyard, tilled the soil myself, and Ethan built a small bench where we sat with sandwiches after long afternoons of work. Peace began to look ordinary. That was the gift. I woke each day not to dread, but to routine. Pension checks arrived. Utility bills got paid. Dinner was simple, grilled cheese or chicken stew, but it tasted like victory because it was ours. At night, I read old westerns while Ethan finished homework. The house no longer echoed with arguments, only the steady hum of living done honestly. The contrast with Laura grew sharper. Reports came in whispers. She had taken a job at a discount store, barely scraping by. She tried reaching out to relatives, but they had heard the stories, seen the court papers, read the police notes. No one wanted to shoulder the weight of her choices. She became isolated, a ghost in a town where everyone remembers. One evening, after her 10th voicemail that week, I whispered into the empty air, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself." Saying it felt like unlocking a door I had kept bolted for too long. For once my worth wasn't tied to being needed or to being drained. It was tied to standing firm. The lesson grew clearer with each passing day. Love is not indulgence. Love is truth with boundaries. A parent's duty is not to give endlessly but to guide, and sometimes guiding means saying no, even when your heart aches. I had confused love with sacrifice, and Laura had learned to confuse sacrifice with entitlement. Now the line was drawn. In the months that followed, Ethan flourished. He saved enough from odd jobs to buy himself a used bicycle, silver paint chipped on the handlebars. He rode it to school, to lawns that needed mowing, to the library where he studied longer than any teacher required. He was building himself, piece by piece, the way a house is built from foundation to roof. And I, old and tired, but not broken, was watching with the pride of a man who knows his legacy will outlast him. The house was safe. The trust papers were ironclad. Derek would serve years, maybe decades. Laura was learning, in the hardest way possible, that deceit carries its own sentence. And me? I had found a kind of freedom I never thought I'd feel at 67. Freedom from fear, freedom from being used, freedom to sit on my porch with a glass of sweet tea and know I had not let myself be destroyed. One crisp evening, I attended a meeting at the local church, a gathering of men and women my age who ran a small community fund for families in need. They welcomed me warmly. I listened more than I spoke. But when it was my turn, I told them I wanted to help however I could. They didn't need my money. Lord knows it was tight. But they wanted my time, my skills, my hands. For the first time since Mary passed, I felt part of something larger than my own battles. I came home that night and wrote in my journal, "Self-respect is worth more than inheritance. Boundaries are worth more than blood ties. Truth is worth more than appearances." It was not bitterness. It was clarity. Laura tried one last time. A letter, folded sloppily, slipped into my mailbox. She wrote that she was sorry, that Derek had lied to her, that she missed her boy and wanted to see him. But at the bottom, she asked again for money. I held the paper in my hands, then dropped it into the fireplace. Flames licked the edges, curling her words into ash. I whispered, "I hope you learn, but I cannot teach you any more." From that day, I chose silence with her, not out of hate, but out of self-preservation. The door remained shut, the line remained drawn, and in that distance I found peace. As summer rolled in, Ethan and I painted the porch railings white, laughter spilling into the quiet street. We built a birdhouse and nailed it to the old maple, watching robins claim it within a week. Life became small in its pleasures, steady in its pace. And that smallness was the very thing Laura had scorned, but I had reclaimed. The war was over. The dust had settled, and I, an old man with calloused hands and a tired back, had kept my home, my dignity, and my grandson's future safe. I whispered to Mary's photo one evening, "I finally did it. I finally said no, and in saying no, I saved us." The photo did not answer, but the peace that filled the room was a reply enough. I had closed the chapter of betrayal. The next chapter would be about living again, not just surviving. And so, as I prepared for that next step, I carried one last truth in my chest. Family is not defined by who shares your blood, but by who respects your soul. That truth would guide me into the life ahead. The days after the courtroom storm settled into something calmer, something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Ethan and I fell into small rhythms that made life steady again. In the mornings, we'd sit at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the curtains Mary had sewn years ago, playing chess on the old wooden board I carved when Ethan was just a boy. He was sharp, quicker than me, and sometimes he'd beat me in less than 20 minutes. I'd pretend to be grumpy, tapping the pieces back into place, but inside, I was proud. In the afternoons, we walked to the park 3 blocks over, where children played on swings and old couples fed ducks. The path circled a pond, and we'd go around twice, talking about school, history, or the way clouds looked like ships. Life was not grand, not rich in dollars, but rich in something far better: quiet, honest time. I often thought about the contrast, how close I had come to losing everything. Not just the house worth $550,000, not just the savings account drained of $320,000, but the simple dignity of being respected in my own home. Betrayal is heavier than any mortgage, heavier than any debt. It sits in your chest like a stone. Yet as I looked across at Ethan's smile or heard his laugh drift down the hallway, I knew the stone had been lifted. It had taken truth, courage, and boundaries to set it down. I kept telling myself, love without boundaries is not love, it's weakness. That was the lesson for every parent who might be listening to my story. To parents, I would say this: don't confuse sacrifice with slavery. Don't let your desire to give become permission for your children to take everything, even your soul. Protect yourself. Protect what you've built. You are not cruel for saying no. You are wise. To children, especially the grown ones who forget, I would say this: don't treat your parents' sacrifice as an endless fountain. The years they spent paying tuition, covering weddings, buying cars, or bailing you out of mistakes, those years cost them sweat, time, and often health. Gratitude is not optional. When gratitude dies, families crack. When entitlement grows, love withers. Don't be the reason your parents go to bed at night wondering if all their giving was wasted. And to anyone trying to understand the modern world, here is the truth I've lived. Greed and selfishness can destroy blood ties. Money can turn brothers into enemies, daughters into strangers, families into battlegrounds. But truth, boundaries, and self-respect stand taller than greed. They are the anchors that hold when storms come. Laura did not vanish from my life entirely. She tried again, this time with a letter. The envelope arrived one rainy Tuesday, her handwriting shaky, the ink smudged as if written through tears. She said she was sorry. She said Derek had misled her. She said she wanted another chance, wanted to come home. At the bottom, though, she wrote the same old line: "Please help me, just a little money until I get back on my feet." I held the paper for a long time. The rain tapped against the window, steady as a drum. Finally, I folded the letter once and set it in the drawer beside unpaid utility bills. I whispered to myself, I don't need her apology. I have my life. That was the boundary. That was the final door. I could remember her as my daughter without allowing her to keep bleeding me dry. I could wish her peace without sacrificing mine. And that choice, as painful as it was, gave me strength. One Saturday, while cleaning out the workshop, I found something buried under a stack of old rags. A wristwatch. My father's watch, the one he had worn every day until the day he died. Its glass was scratched, its leather band cracked, but it still ticked faintly when I wound it. I carried it inside and placed it on the desk where I kept the trust papers. Looking at that watch reminded me of what matters: time. Time spent honestly. Time spent with people who honor you. Time not wasted on those who would rather see your downfall than your joy. It was a small discovery, but it felt like a sign, a reminder from the past to keep living with dignity. Now, evenings belong to stillness. I sit on the porch as the sun sinks, painting the sky in streaks of gold and violet. Ethan sometimes joins me with a glass of lemonade, sometimes with a book. The cicadas sing. The world feels right again. I breathe and think, family isn't who takes from you, it's who stands beside you. That sentence has become my prayer, my closing chapter, my truth. And so I offer these lessons to anyone who listens. To parents, protect your love with boundaries. To children, honor the sacrifices given to you, don't exploit them. And to all of us living in this restless modern world, remember that greed will try to poison blood, but self-respect and truth will always hold their ground. I don't know if Laura will ever change. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But I do know this: my story is not about her downfall. It's about my survival, my choice to reclaim peace, and the young man sitting beside me who deserves a future built on honesty, not deceit. As I watch the sun dip behind the trees, the watch ticking softly on the desk inside, I feel no bitterness, only clarity. My journey has ended not in defeat, but in quiet victory, and every day that passes proves it was the right choice. I have my home, I have my grandson, I have my peace, and I have myself. That is enough.